And then who's going to be a big part of our conversations and already been part of these conversations in these weeks and months is Viktor Gyökeres. What's going on for Viktor Gyökeres? So guys, let me explain to you. Basically, there was a pact between the agents of Viktor Gyökeres and Sporting since last summer for Sporting to accept this summer 2025, a transfer fee around 65 million euros plus add-ons for Viktor Gyökeres. So not the release clause, 100 million euros, but 65 with add-ons. Why you say they don't ask the release clause for this player? First of all, because they wanted to respect Viktor Gyökeres, who had the possibility to leave the club 1 year ago, and he didn't. Then the coach leaves in November, and maybe any other top player would say, okay, I'm leaving in January. No, Viktor Gyökeres respects Sporting, wins the trophy, the league, and also the cup. So fantastic season with 63 goals, 10 assists, unbelievable season again for Viktor Gyökeres. And so Sporting were prepared to give this green light. But today, the president of Sporting says in public that he's not accepting 65 million euros as fixed transfer fee for Gyokeres. He wants more. He said not the release clause, not 100, but more than 65. The player is not happy with that, of course. We saw on social media the player removing from his Instagram account the Sporting reference, so probably the player was expecting to be facilitated in his exit from the club this summer. At the moment, this is still not the case. The president said we still don't have an official bid, but let me repeat that the calls are still there. Manchester United have called last week, have called over the weekend, and have called again this week for Viktor Gyökeres to be informed about the player, to understand their conditions, to understand what's going on with Sporting, to understand if there is still a chance to make it happen financially after not making it into Champions League. So Man United have been in active talks for Viktor Gyökeres in terms of understanding the situation, not club-to-club talks. There is no bid from Man United as of this afternoon, then we will see later in the next days, but for sure now this tense situation between Gyökeres and Sporting is an important point of the story to tell you in this moment. So we will see what happens with Gyokeres, but for sure an interesting point to watch, and remember that he remains also on Arsenal list in case the Šeško deal doesn't happen. But for Šeško the conversations are ongoing, advancing, and so Benjamin Šeško remains the priority, but Gyokeres is still on Arsenal list in case that deal doesn't happen. And so guys, let me know your thoughts on all these stories from Gyokeres. Where do you see his future? And then Sverre Nipan.
By talking about Manchester United, shall we? Because they've signed Matheus Cunha already this summer. They've made offers for Brian and Burmo. They're also linked with Viktor Gyökeres. A lot of people will be asking, how can they afford to spend so much despite not having European football, and Sir Jim Ratcliffe saying that they're in debt?
Remember that when a club signs a player, the cost is actually spread over the life of the contract. So in the case of Matheus Cunha, it's £1 million a month. So it's not £60 million that's going out of the PSR calculation. We also need to remember that this is Manchester United, so sponsors still want to be associated with them. Fans will still flock to Old Trafford. And I think they will be anticipating a better season in the Premier League next season. And I think the third main issue is all of the focus has been on Manchester United PLC's accounts, which are registered in New York. And there we saw a loss of £131 million last year. But that is not the company which is used for PSR purposes, because you've got to be based in the UK. And it looks as if Manchester United have been using another company called Red Football, and the losses there were only £36 million. So therefore, they're £100 million better off for PSR purposes on the back of that. Manchester United still a destination club as far as many players are concerned. Yeah, they want to play in front of Old Trafford because it's an iconic stadium. It's a fanatical fan base and all of the positives that brings. So that can offset perhaps some of the financial issues.
Right, how about Chelsea then? Another team that often gets spoken about when it comes around to transfers. They seem to be well clear of PSR requirements despite the amount that they've spent since Todd Bowley's consortium bought the club. How is that the case?
That's right. Chelsea have got the most expensive squad as far as Premier League is concerned, at around about £1.5 billion. That's at least £350 million more than anybody else has invested in players. What Chelsea don't get credit for is A, their ability to sell players, and B, a lot of those players tend to be academy players, so therefore they're pure profits. We've seen Mason Mount, Conor Gallagher, Billy Gilmore, Figaro Tomori, and so on leave Chelsea and generate all of these profits. Chelsea, remember when they initially started to expand their squad under Todd Boehly, they did it on the 8 and 9 year contracts. So again, that's spreading the cost over a longer period of time before those rules were outlawed by both UEFA and the Premier League. And they got a £250 million boost at least through the sale of the women's team, the sale of the car parks and the sale of the hotel, which can go into the transfer budget. So you put all of those factors together, Chelsea are in a fantastic position from a PSR point of view.
So Chelsea seem to have a bit of headroom then, Kieran, but on the flip side, Aston Villa don't seem to have that same luxury. Do you think they could be in trouble if they don't sell again?
I think of the 20 Premier League clubs, Villa are the ones who we're most concerned about. Last season, when they did qualify for the Champions League, for every £100 of revenue that Aston Villa brought in, they spent £91 on wages. Those players will have had contract step-ups for qualifying for the Champions League this season. And remember, Villa have done very well in that competition, so that will be a plus. And they have sold some players as well in both last summer market and the January one. But I think there is still a perception that Villa will have to box clever. And of all of the clubs under pressure to sell players by the 30th of June, I guess they're the ones who are the one at the club that gives the most attention because their spending in the last couple of years before getting Europe was so extensive.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Newcastle were in a similar position, weren't they, previously? They had some PSI issues last summer. They had to sell Elliot Anderson, Jan Cooper, Minter. What are they looking like at the moment? Have they got themselves back into a better position to spend now?
Yes, Newcastle United had 3 very quiet windows by their standards. And I think the good news for Newcastle is that season 2021, because PSR is assessed over a 3-year period, season 2021, 21-22, when Newcastle lost over £70 million, that drops out of the equation on the 1st of July. So therefore, I think Newcastle are in a much stronger position this summer to compete once again in the market. They don't have as free a rein as the likes of Chelsea, but they are still in a far stronger position than they were 12 months ago. And I don't see any pressure on the club with that need to sell players before they start to bring anybody in. It could be that there will be some player trading. They certainly have freed up some of the spots on the wage budget, but there's not that very, very significant pressure that we saw, as you rightly say, with Anderson and Minte leaving last June.